What's up everybody, welcome back to another video. Today what I want to do is talk about tutorial hell and how you can get out of what seems to be an infinite loop of tutorials. Now we've all been there, I've been there. This is something that a lot of self-taught programmers end up going through. They end up taking one tutorial after another tutorial, but they end up not knowing how to get something done. This is something that I personally faced very early on in my journey of learning how to code. I bought literally every single book I could get my hands on. I watched every single video and I joined an online learning platform called lynda.com. They've since been purchased by LinkedIn and now it's called LinkedIn Learning. And on there I watched everything on HTML, on CSS, on JavaScript, on PHP, on MySQL, on Python, Linux, WordPress, you name it. I took every single tutorial. But the problem is if you go down that route of just taking one tutorial after another and not make your own projects, then you're not really shaping your brain. You're not building the muscle memory. And I like to say that it's kind of like working out. If you go to the gym and you're lifting, say 135 pounds, bench pressing that weight, but you never go up from there and you never do any other exercises, you're not really progressing. And if you're a runner, if you run the same pace and the same distance all the time, you're not building any real endurance. And for us programmers and coders, if you take one tutorial after another without building your own projects, well, that's not the best way to learn. And now there's a bunch of videos like this. I know Uncle Steph has created a video about this. I know Brad Travis has created a video about this and a bunch of others. And their videos are really good, so you should definitely check them out. But I want to give you my 2 cents. For whatever that's worth. And as someone who makes tutorials here on YouTube, in particular on how to create WordPress themes and other videos on how to code, just watching those videos and going through the projects doesn't necessarily make you a WordPress developer or a programmer. So if you want to break out of the infinite loop of tutorial hell, this is what you got to do. Obviously we need tutorials. I mean, it's just easier nowadays just to follow the path that somebody else created. But then you got to think about the fact that back in the day, they didn't have tutorials, right? They didn't have YouTube. They didn't have Stack Overflow, they didn't have Google, and they didn't have ChatGPT. But they were able to develop something and program something brand new from scratch. How do they do it? The trial and error approach. They failed and failed and failed until they got it right. They identified what programming languages they would need in order to create the project they wanted to work on. And from there, they just kept on trying to create what they wanted to do. And because they failed so many times, they were finally able to get it right eventually, as long as they didn't give up. So the trial and error approach is one of the best ways to learn. But again, we have so many resources at our disposal, so it kind of makes sense to follow these tutorials. So if you want to be a WordPress developer, definitely check out my video on how to create custom WordPress themes. But the thing is, while you're taking that tutorial or any tutorial that you're watching on any programming language, what you want to do is while you're taking the tutorial, make sure you pay full attention to what you're learning. Try not to get distracted. Another tip is you should really type out all the code yourself. I know a lot of these platforms, they'll give you the code, you can copy it, paste it. And if you go to Stack Overflow, same thing, you can copy the code, paste it into your editor. But the thing is, it's better to type it out yourself. You're building muscle memory. And it's a better way for you to embed the information in your brain. I mean, ultimately, what's your goal? Do you want to be a copy and paste programmer or a programmer? All right, so just type out the code yourself. And while doing that, while going through the tutorial, if there's anything that the author of that tutorial didn't cover in depth, or if there's more clarity that you're searching for, take down some notes. You could handwrite it out if you want, or you could use one of my favorite tools, which is OneNote. I like having OneNote open because what I could do is type out my notes, and then from there, whether I'm doing it on my computer or my laptop, it's available across all my devices. And there's a bunch of different applications that have the same functionality, so just choose one. All right, so we're going through the tutorial, we're writing down our notes, and we're typing out the code ourselves. The next thing is you want to make sure you don't skip a step. Go through the whole entire tutorial from beginning to end. And once you're done with the project, once you're done with the tutorial, what you should do at that point is not go to the next one. I mean, we're kind of spoiled in the sense that we have so many resources at our disposal that we end up feeling like we have to take all these different tutorials. But that just delays the process of actually building your own project. So once you're done with that tutorial, go back over the code, go back over your notes. See where you had any questions where you want to seek further clarity. At that point, you could go on Stack Overflow, you can go on Google, or you could use ChatGPT. Make sure you have a full understanding of how that project in that tutorial worked. How did the code work? What was the developer teaching you in terms of the process of creating that project? And then the next step is make it your own. Start changing some of the code around. If it's the CSS, start changing the styling around. If it's the HTML, see if you could take the right sidebar and make a left sidebar. Maybe create some other rigid areas on the bottom. If it's JavaScript, start working with the different JavaScript functions that are available. Alter what was demonstrated in the code. And if it's PHP or Python, start just changing up the code a little bit. See what happens. Don't be afraid to break the project. If you're just starting off, then you definitely should take a backup of the code before you start making any of these changes. And then definitely this is where version control can come in handy, because from there, you can experiment and make branches for new features and new functionality that you want to toy around with. But ultimately, you want to make that project your own. And then what I recommend is taking what you learned in terms of the different functions, classes, objects, data structures, whatever it is in the tutorial you're taking, and see how you can apply that to a brand new small project. Now, don't try to create the next Instagram, don't try to create the next YouTube. Try something small. Try like a tic-tac-toe game, or try making a simple to-do list or a simple calculator. First try to get it to function properly, and then try to get it styled properly. Ultimately, what you want to do is exercise your brain and try to take what you've learned in that tutorial and apply it to smaller projects. And try to choose a variety of projects. Try to keep it different. Try to make sure that you're not always doing the exact same thing, because you want to exercise your brain. You want to be able to take what you learned and apply it in a different direction, in a different manner. Again, we're trying to emulate what the first programmers went through. When they didn't have YouTube, when they didn't have Stack Overflow, when they didn't have Uncle Steph and Brad Traversy teaching us on YouTube. They had to learn on their own. And in some cases, they had to become expert at reverse engineering code that they've seen. And that's another thing. If you are a web developer, if there's a website that you like, try to clone that website. Try to see if you can make the same website in your local development environment. It's like a painter learning how to paint. At first, they start sketching out some drawings that they've seen, or maybe they'll start painting some paintings that they're really interested in trying to emulate the artist's design. Over time, they get really good at copying what they're seeing. But ultimately, the goal for them, for the most part, is to create something new. Now, you got to remember, tutorials are a very important part of the learning process. They provide you a path. They provide you some level of direction in terms of completing a project. The good tutorials take you step by step. And even the bad tutorials, you can learn from those as well. You could take the code that they're providing you and you could try to make it work better. And sometimes if there's gaps in information, you could try to think about how to fill in that gap. It's about stretching the way you think. And that's how you end up learning how to think like a programmer. All right, so to recap, basically you don't want to be stuck in an infinite loop of taking one tutorial after another. You might think you're progressing, but you're not. Not as fast as you could be if you take that tutorial and then make something new of it. And another tip, what you could do is try to teach that same tutorial to somebody else. By going through the process of trying to do a video, even if you never upload it, going through the steps of trying to teach that very same topic is a good way to enhance your learning process. Alright, so hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification icon. If you have any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions, leave them down below. And as always, thanks for watching and happy coding.